The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, we welcome back Benjamin-Alexandre, Jeanroy, and Aurélien Bernard, co-founders of Augur Associates. Augur are a French cannabis consultancy, and the guys were on about a year ago, I think, and they're here to give us a bit of an update on France. This will probably go out in a little while, but this is being recorded on 4/20, so I'm glad I'm talking to these guys on this day. Guys, welcome. How are you?
Amazing. It's 4:20. It can't be bad.
Very fine. Thanks, Annie.
Yeah, good. So yeah, like over a year ago, I think that we did it. And yeah, I think we were just going into the first lockdown, or we're in the middle of it. How are things going with you guys now?
No, everything is going fine. In fact, we are in good shape. We are healthy and not COVID positive until now. So we had a lot of chance to be there and also to be able to work because a lot of people have to stop working either their shop or their activity. And in fact, we were all touched at the beginning of the COVID, but after a month, business just continued. So we are very lucky to be there to work in cannabis. Cannabis hasn't been impacted or negatively impacted by COVID, more positively, in fact. And I think we had a lot of work this past year. So lucky to be there.
That's great to hear.
Thank you so much for having us, Anuj, another time. And to complete what Aurélien has been saying, I think it's been a roller coaster for everyone, even more in our industry. And I think because we work in this industry, we're kind of accustomed to things not being un long fleuve tranquille, as we say in French, a long, tranquil river. And so I think it's an advantage for people working in complex and constantly evolving environments, just like cannabis is. And so it's another layer of complexity, but I think we were quite well armed to dive into it.
That's brilliant. And we'll get into it in a sec, a bit more about what you're up to. But just for the benefit of the guys that didn't listen to the last time round, would you mind just sort of giving us a bit of background on yourselves and how and why you got into the cannabis industry?
Yes. So I'm Aurélien. Historically, I'm the founder of Newsweed.fr, which is the leading media on cannabis news in France. Actually, it's my 6th birthday today. I began my adventure on cannabis 6 years ago. My first article was, what is 420? Because it was my first question. It was the question that created Newsweed. So it's double special day for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And Newsweed is not pro-legalization, is not pro-cannabis, it's just news and analysis of what is happening everywhere in the world. But at personal level, I thought that we have to make things evolve in France. And that's how I met Benjamin 1 year after creating Newsweed. And so we did our common adventure to try to help at the beginning people who were already advocating for change in France with all the associations. And we could try to reshape this association and to work together. Finally, believing that other leads were to follow. So we worked also with the hemp union, which gathers all the actors of medical cannabis and hemp in France. And then 2 years ago, in fact, now, we created Augur Associates. It was a missing piece in the French landscape of cannabis. There was no agency to help and advise and companies dedicated to work with hemp and cannabis in France. And that's what we are doing together now. And we are working with companies that work in France, but also that work on cannabis elsewhere.
Fantastic. And how was owning a kind of media space in cannabis?
In fact, in France, and I am very lucky, I shouldn't say that because it could be dangerous for me, but I'm the only one in France, and there is no other media on cannabis. There is other people who are doing blog, who are doing other things, but not a media like I do. And it's very important to have Newsweed in the French landscape, because otherly French people wouldn't know what is happening in France and elsewhere in the world. I'm also a solution for CBD companies to make advertising. You know that all the social networks refuse to do advertising. Some websites are beginning to do it. But as a specialized media, I have a very targeted audience and the possibility to just advertise what is legal in France and in Europe. So yeah, I'm really, really lucky to be there, and really glad to offer a solution to people who have not.
Fantastic. I'm obviously a big fan of the media, so I'm glad you're doing that.
You should.
Absolutely. Ben, do you want to take a turn at introducing yourself?
Of course. So I'm Benjamin. I started working in drug policy at UNODC, which is the UN agency for drugs and crime. And I worked in Central America and Southeast Asia before coming back about 5 years ago, in France, where I kept working on drug policy reform this time, and more at the civil society influence and advocacy side. That's where I met Aurélien, who helped us start our first organization, which was called ECHO. And ECHO was kind of at the crossroad in between democratic renovation and complex topics. And our first one was drug policy, and really was the idea of how to make a merge public policy reform proposal from bottoms up approach, counterbalance with scientific counsel and expertise, not only from the circles, but also from the ground. And so we worked on numerous initiatives on that aspect. And we kind of finished a little bit of that process, that period, with a big poll that we did with a leading think tank in France called Terra Nova. And it was the biggest poll ever done on cannabis in France. And that's where we had our first interesting number. I think around 84% of French people were in favor of medical cannabis, and that never had happened before. And so a couple of months ago, I think it helped unlock something that was brewing for a long time and pushed by so many people for so long. And a couple of months ago, the health minister of the time, Agnès Buzyn, announced that medical cannabis was on the table and we should start thinking about it. And that's what started the process of the experimentation, which we'll talk a little bit later on. And so it was an interesting time to be in cannabis and drug policy reform in France, because for the first time in decades, it started moving. And so 3 years ago, as Aurélien said, we helped co-created the professional hemp union. And the idea was really to start wading a little bit in the public debate and shape it in the right direction. And it took 3 years. We're getting at the end of that process of regulation. And so it took 3 years from there to where we are now. And so we work with Aurélien. We mostly publish 2 very big white papers that I recommend to anyone who wants to learn a little bit about France. There are summaries in English attached on our website. You can check it out. And basically it was to give tools to public policymakers, to how best regulate both markets, the medical one and the CBD, which we call wellness hemp here in France. So we presented it in front of numerous institutions, including the parliament. And all this work really led to where can we be the most useful? Because that was kind of our motto. And like, we're advocating, we're doing influence, we're trying to push those topics, but we're not just doing it for the sake of it. We really want to be critical of our actions and see what works, what doesn't, what has worked in the past, what doesn't work in France, in Europe, and so we understood that there were new markets, building it, and we could help and bring in, I'd say, good practices and different set of values and understanding of this plant that is not neutral. It has a social and history background that is important to take into account. And so it's not a good like anything else. I think it's really a special topic. And so you need specialized people to work with you if you intend to get into those markets that are highly complicated, ever evolving, where, your reputation is everything and you can't do so many mistakes in launching and in continuing and developing your products. And so we created Augur Associates with another partner who's in there, Arnaud, who's heading our financial services. And Augur, the idea is really to have a one-stop shop for the industry, obviously in France, also for working with a lot of people that are outside of France, but that want to work with French people, whether for the French culture or whether they're French themselves. And because of that, we have an amazing project going on a little bit all over the world. And then we work a lot also in Europe with other countries, other people from other countries. So it's an exciting times, because and I think it's a little bit because of the COVID situation, we got to expand kind of by necessity, like everyone else. And so we opened a lot of doors in the end this year.
Yeah. Fantastic. Are you able to talk about some of the projects you're working on?
So I think there's many, but I think one that is really cool is that we're finding new ways to bring medical cannabis products to patients in France outside of the experimentation. So there's different means. Obviously research is one of them, but different kinds of research. Some are more accessible than others. And that combined with the complexity of the research/public health system in France, it's a little bit of a puzzle, which we are happy to work with clients actually. There's also compassionate access schemes, which are called ATUs. And ATUs allow for doctors to ask to have the possibility to import products that don't have a market authorization in France. And so those processes exist in most countries of the world, but in France, it hasn't been used for medical cannabis product except for more pharma type products like Epidiolex and Sativex, but also Marinol. And so doing this extra steps right now and trying to bring a little bit of relief and maybe a little bit of solace to some patients in France, and at the same time helping companies get a fit in France. It's exciting projects. And so that's some of the things that we do in France. And outside of France, we're working in several countries where I can't say much, but there isn't any legislations around hemp or CBD or medical cannabis, but because of our work, there will be. And so it's exciting too, because it's fresh lands. And at the same time, you're expanding possibilities in those countries with those markets. And so working with people there and building projects from ground up, from strategy to the whole operations. And so it's really fun.
Yeah, wow. There's sort of a pioneering element to the things you're talking about. So that must be very exciting indeed. Why don't we get into it about France then? Last year you gave a great sort of overview of where things are going, or where things were really. But there's obviously been a lot of stuff that's happened over the last 12 months. Do you want to kind of give us an update on the situation? Maybe we start with medical cannabis and then we talk about CBD and hemp and a bit of rec.
Okay. So since last year for medical cannabis, there is a really new thing that is the launching of the experimentation of medical cannabis. So it has started the past months, the previous months on March. So in France, it's very, very narrow. But it's 3,000 people allowed to have medical cannabis prescribed. And these 3,000 people have serious disease. It's like multiple sclerosis, cancer, neurologic disorders. They are almost to die to be prescribed. And the prescription is like very, very difficult to have. But at least That's the beginning of the experimentation that will last 2 years with imported cannabis from Canada, Israel, and Australia, and prescribed in hospital and pharmacy with trained doctors. So it will take a little bit of time to have the 3,000 patients inside the experimentation, just the time to set up the thing. But it's really the launching of medical cannabis. We saw that, for example, in the United Kingdom, it took time. Even now, it's really, really complicated. It's legal, but really complicated to have it. So in France, it's not really legal, just 3,000 people allowed to have it, but maybe it will be quicker to do that way, and then have a full generalization of medical cannabis compared to United Kingdom, where it should be really open. It's legally open, but doctors are not trained, and medical cannabis is really difficult to have it and to be prescribed. So big news for France this year. As for CBD, nothing really changed except the European decision of the cannabis case that you should have followed. So it was an old trial that began in 2014, I think, in France, and they went to European Court of Justice to decide if CBD was a narcotic and to decide if in France we could import CBD from other countries. It was legally the things that was decided, and the court decided that CBD was not a narcotic, obviously, and that we should have the possibility to sell CBD in France if it is imported from another country. So it didn't change the French law, but it allows the entrepreneurs and the company to import CBD from Europe, from other countries in Europe, and to sell it in France. So as I said, French law didn't change. It will have to, but for now it's like 1 year ago, except that every business understood that CBD was fully legal in France, and that we see 3 times more shops selling CBD since last November. So it has been a really open flag for CBD, except that legally nothing changed. So it will be in the next months. It could be really complicated for the shop if the French law change, allow CBD but not the flower, for example. Everything could be set up. And it could be a real danger for these companies that preempted the domain and the sector. And for hemp, nothing changed. We always have the right to cultivate hemp and to sell the seed and the stems. At the European level, there is discussion to put the level of THC from 0.2 to 0.3, and that could allow for more strains and more CBD in the strain, because in fact it's the main industrial interest to have more THC in the plant. And one commission agreed to do it, and it remains 2 other commissions to agree, and we will be able to have more diversity in hemp strains everywhere in Europe.
Brilliant. On hemp, is there a strong food market as well as a strong industrial hemp market in France?
I can't measure really the food hemp market, because we have hemp protein, hemp oil, hemp seed oil since years in France. It has never been forbidden, but I really don't know what is weight in the total hemp economy. It's really, I think it's really a small part. The industrial part of the hemp is really massive, because it is used for building, for clothes, to make bio oil, to build cars. And if your question was related to novel food and CBD, in fact, in France, we don't apply the novel food catalog. So for now, it's really a gray area for all the oil producers and CBD infused food, because they allow themselves to do it. And France never acknowledged the CBD European as a novel food European catalog. So it's really gray. And if everyone should have a novel food certification, it will really take time, like what we saw in United Kingdom.
Yeah, novel foods was one of the questions I was going to ask you about. So in France, in order to sell CBD, it doesn't have to have gone through the novel food process.
Not for now.
Not for now. Do you think it might change then?
It might change because of French government, or it might change because of European regulation. It's really the Far West for CBD in Europe and in France. Entrepreneurs are guided by trials and by general law, but there is no a real regulation on CBD and on all the CBD products. We have for CBD in cosmetics, for example, we know what to do. But the particularity of the novel food catalog is that it's a European book, but each state member doesn't have to follow it. So unless the country says that all the CBD oil have to be novel food, the entrepreneur don't have to do it. So, and if, for example, the food safety security in France says that everything should be novel food, it will be hard for CBD companies in France.
Yeah, that would have a big impact. So, recreational isn't really, I don't think, a very viable short-term target. But what's the general feeling in France? I think France is the biggest weed smokers in Europe. So what's the general feeling in relation to recreational?
I will let you that, Benjamin.
So it's quite paradoxical, right? You've mentioned it. We have a high consumer rate. Not only that, but we have one of the highest young, first timer experimentation rate, which is really not something we should be proud of. But obviously drug policy, like any other issues, has to be taken into account within a larger context. And the political context today in France is difficult in terms of, I'd say, security policy. And the very fact that it remains a security policy is in itself telling, right? And so we see in 1 year, in a year exactly, will be the French presidential election. And therefore this year is going to be immensely important in terms of engagement. Everything that we'll be able to do this year can have more impact than anything that we'll be able to do in the next 5. And there is openings. There is, more and more people from the right, from the left that are coming out in favor of drug policy reform, cannabis legalization, narcotic decriminalization. However, currently the government doesn't seem to go, willing to go that way, in more chasing voters from what he expects people from the right would be responding. And I don't necessarily agree with that view, obviously, because I see a lot of people coming from the right political sphere getting engaged and thinking about reforming our drug policies. I think has become, just like in the UK, just like in the US, a transpartisan issue with, we're getting into the interesting debate of what are the choices we're going to do in terms of regulation. But still, we're a centralized country, highly presidentialized country. Everything is in the hands of Macron and the next president, whoever it may be. And so we'll keep pushing this year. There is, all the tells, the momentum is there. And the question will be really, will France jump on the wagon with a chance to become a leading country in Europe into this market with everything that it has, with the French brand, with its industry nucleus, its technology, its climate, or its pharma industry, everything that you can think about? Or will it wait till it can't be done and anything, otherly than wrongly? I think when you're pushed into regulation, it can never go well. And so that's the question that France will have to answer next year, even if, it's difficult to assess. But we're quite happy for now with everything that has been engaged on the 2 other markets, the medical one and the CBD. And I would just complete what Aurélien said on the wellness CBD process right now. The Parliament published a report in February on this topic, and they're currently being held interministerial reunion meetings to decide what they're going to do about this topic. And so it's about allowing the flowers for what purposes. It's about thinking about maybe having a higher percentage of maximum THC allowed in the final product, in the grow phase, what can be done in terms of administrative status for these products, and therefore who can sell them. So all this, and what kind of seeds we can use, how we can have more viable seeds into the French catalogs, for example. So all those questions are crucial for the sustained development of those markets are being decided right now. We do hope to have some kind of answers in between. It should be June, but it's COVID. It's still COVID time. So I would say September, probably it's more realistic, but it's moving, even if it's kind of traîner des pieds un petit peu. I don't know how you say that in English, but the government is getting there. And same thing for the medical cannabis. It's frustrating because it's some very little patience. French don't have the right to grow just yet. So all those questions remain in suspense. But we're moving forward at least.
Yes, it's never fast enough. It certainly isn't in the UK. And I think France is suffers from similar problems. There's a kind of core of conservatism that sort of holds a lot of this stuff back. But, thankfully, you guys are doing a good job at trying to push that agenda, which is brilliant. As we kind of come towards the end, can you reflect a bit on the state of the cannabis education in France? So primarily I'm thinking here of the medical fraternity, so the doctors, because obviously that's a crucial part of unlocking this for everyone else. Are you seeing anything around that? Are people, are more doctors interested in learning about this? Because we've talked about it many times on the show, how just the endocannabinoid system isn't taught in medical schools, and I'm sure it's the same in France as well. How are things progressing on that front?
I think the doctors are very interested in knowing and getting more knowledge about cannabis. The only fact is that there is no lessons about cannabis during the medicine school. It takes 4 lines in a whole book on the danger of cannabis and not at all on medical cannabis. We have a first degree since this year in one university in France, in Paris-Saclay, I think, and in collaboration with Montpellier, if no mistake. And it was really, really, it's the same. It's really the beginning. Even if it's only one lesson, it means that it will be more the next year. But yesterday I was speaking with a doctor who has multiple sclerosis and who was part of the committee that shaped the medical experimentation of medical cannabis in France. And he told me that some of the doctors, beginning to prescribe CBD to patients, even if there is no real medication, but at least there is a prescription, and they are able to go to the pharmacy and with, I don't know how we say it in English, but some magistral preparation. It's like a recipe from the pharmacist to the patient, and they are beginning to prescribe CBD in that way. Which is really good. And he was talking about CBD. And I just reminded that there is not only CBD in the plants, but also THC and other cannabinoids. And so they have a lot of things to discover. You told about the endocannabinoid system. I'm sure not even 1% of the doctors in France know it. So it will take a lot of time, but again, it's the same thing. It's really, really slow. It's a bit of laziness, but it's really consolidating all the stability that will be there in the next year. Small step by small step, it will come to, I think I'm always have the good side of the vision, but in the next year, we'll have a really solid medical cannabis system in France. It will take time, but patients will have access to medical cannabis one day, as they should be since 20 or 30 years now. since the discovering of CBD and THC by Metrulam. I don't know if Benjamin share my vision. I know he's a bit more pessimistic than me usually.
No, I would say that there is a strong need and demand for knowledge from more and more from the health practitioners, whether they're prescribers or, nurses, pharmacists, and I think a larger scale of professionals that are interested in getting to know more about this complex topic because they're being asked or they encounter a situation where they have to deal with that and they don't know anything. And so I think you have a greater responses in the younger generation, obviously. But I think what's interesting is that you still get to have an actor or actors in France that are able to deliver quality, available French contextualized formation for medical practitioners, online. Everything that exists currently is in English. And it demand investments. It takes a long time to translate, to contextualize, to voice dub, all those things. And there is a space because you currently have a lot of demand and you're going to have more and more. So I'm a little surprised because the place, hasn't been taken. So if anyone listening to us is interested to get into touch with that, we'd love some of those projects we'd love to work on because it's definitely some of the barriers that we know exist and can impede the sustainable growth of this reform. So I think it could be great to implement something that has French understanding and it's as specific as Germany or the UK or Spain or the US. And right now there isn't a lot of things. So Aurélien mentioned one program, university program that is being developed this year. And it's a 6 months program. So there are 2 promo each year. It's about 30 people each promo. So hopefully there are going to be more because it's limited, even if, as what we've been saying from the beginning, it's still that first steps that are super important. But I'm positive because a lot of people are going to want to go there, but we need quality information and education, which we're lacking currently.
Yeah. If only you owned a media site, eh? I loved the sales pitch at the end. And I think it's great, isn't it? The doctors that I speak to, I think are very interested in finding non-opioid, non-prescriptive, not pharmaceutical options. So they're interested in hearing more, but they also need the type of proof that they're used to. And, that's why we need more studies and more data. And hopefully we can meet in the middle somewhere. So I too share your optimism. So that's good. Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. It's really interesting to get a catch up on France. It's a huge territory, huge economy. So I'm hopeful that someone might be interested in following this up and they'll provide your contact details as well. But thanks again for joining me on 420. I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Anush. You too.
Thank you, Anush.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Take care.